Hi, I'm Cheryl Koenigsberg, Director of Global Product Marketing here at Mendix, and I am thrilled to be talking with Gordon Van Huizen today about the future of low code. Gordon, wish we were both in Rotterdam, but we'll have to settle for Boston.
Yeah, settle for Boston. Yeah, I wish we were there too. I haven't been to Rotterdam in, gosh, since February. So I'm Gordon Van Huizen, VP of Platform Strategy, which is why I spend a lot of time in Rotterdam. But great to be hanging out virtually with you this morning, Cheryl.
So let's get started. We have a lot to talk about. You have been in application development for nearly your entire career, and yet we've agreed it seems as if low code is having a moment right now. Why do you think that is?
Boy, that's a great way to put it, having a moment for sure. Well, to begin with, I guess it's fair to say that low code has been in the limelight for the last several years. It's become a very identifiable component of digitalization, and it's reached the point where low code is perceived by many to be the future of application development overall. So it was ready for prime time. I think what's making the focus on low code even more dramatic right now is digitalization. On the one hand, organizations are pushing forward with digital strategies right and left to ensure that they can compete within the markets that they're in. But the world that we find ourselves in across the globe with the pandemic has only accelerated certain aspects of that. Organizations have to find new ways to work with their customers, work with their partners, and to collaborate internally. And that requires new forms of digital solutions, which in turn requires experimentation and getting solutions out into people's hands really quickly, which are, of course, the things that low code is particularly good at. So we're seeing a really interesting surge in new developers on the platform and in new apps that are being created. And I think it really stems from that. So it took an existing trend, really, that was happening within business more broadly and has accelerated some really key aspects of it.
And so you mentioned new solutions. What are some of the changes we're seeing and how low code is being used these days?
Well, so if we think about the last few years, there's been a very interesting progression where low code and no code, the simpler form of development platform or developer tool, were initially perceived as being only for departmental level use. I build an app for myself, I build an app for my immediate team, and it's effectively a disposable app in some way, if you want to think about it that way. And then we saw a shift towards low code for innovation. If you're building a new innovative solution, that requires some degree of experimentation, and low code is a great way to go about doing that. But starting 2 to 3 years ago, I would say, we saw a real evolution of low code in the enterprise. And by that I mean applying a low code approach, developing a wide variety of enterprise solutions, not just at the departmental level, not just for new innovative solutions, but for rebuilding core systems, legacy modernization or legacy replacement, which was something that I think very few people would have anticipated prior to that point in time. So I think that's one of the big things that we've seen.
Are
The
people,
other thing yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I'm wondering, are we seeing people use low code for things like, I don't know, the Amazon Alexa or any other sort
Well,
of.
that's actually where I was thinking about going next, which is that at the same time, we're seeing a change in the way that people interact with businesses, and by virtue of that, how they interact with systems. And where there's a shift, close to 10 years ago now, it began from web-based user interfaces, desktop apps that run on computers, to leveraging mobile devices. And initially that kind of parroted what happened on larger displays, just on smaller displays. We've moved well beyond that now to highly tailored mobile solutions that really support what people want to do and need to do on mobile devices. And it's quickly expanding beyond that into new forms of interaction, conversational user experiences that could happen on a mobile device. It's just another mode on a mobile device, if you want to think about it that way, to voice-based interactions. And then we're also seeing things like, in the concept of digitalizing things, augmented reality, where we overlay user interfaces onto the world when people wear wearable devices and that kind of thing. So the way many people think of that now is multi-experience. And how do we build software solutions that support multi-experience, not just those additional channels, if you want to think of them as channels, but in a way that really satisfies what the user needs and wants at each touch point. Because really, the system they work with is always there. It's running in the cloud. It's doing things on their behalf, hopefully on their behalf. And there's a set of times that individuals interact with that system. We call those touch points. So that in and of itself is a really significant endeavor for virtually every organization that needs to do it. And that's happening at the same time as this other shift around how software is developed and needs to be developed to satisfy enterprise requirements.
So do you think there'll be a difference between low-code platforms and multi-experience platforms, or do you think that'll become the same thing?
Well, I think there are platforms that can satisfy both. And I think that comes with a lot of different requirements. There's having the right architectural foundation so that you can create very tailored experiences for each touch point. There's what should that experience be? And that's where low code can really add a lot of value as well. And then there's thinking about it really as the user journey and how to map out that user journey and how do you support it. So I think what we'll see is that some low code platforms can address all that. And there are other tools that have been used outside of app development that may start to make their way into low code platforms and multi-experience platforms.
So you said something a couple minutes ago that caught my attention. You talked about taking a low-code approach to different types of technology. And when I think low-code approach, what I immediately see is, either drag and drop UI development, or I see drag and drop flow modeling of logic. But it sounds like what you're talking about is more than that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you picked up on that because low-code approach to me, and I think to everybody at Mendix, means a lot more than just simplifying things and creating visual tools versus text-based tools. The core principles of it that have been part of our ethos and our product strategy since the beginning are abstraction and automation. So the abstraction is what is the best way to surface something so that people can understand it and work with it. And certainly visual modeling is an approach to abstraction. But the automation part of it is incredibly important because there's a lot that needs to be done in the process of building an app, getting an app deployed and managing that app that is quite honestly a set of rote steps that could and should be automated. So, for example, deploying an app to the cloud is a non-trivial thing under the covers. There's a lot of steps that occur. Provisioning and managing cloud infrastructure. If you had to do all of that manually, it would take a very, very long time. So, and also it would be a lot of not exactly high-value work at the end of the day. So it's that combination of having the right abstractions with automation that really comes together in what I think of as the low-code approach. Another aspect of it that is starting to be applied, and I think will have a lot of value moving forward, is applying artificial intelligence, augmenting what the developer can do, not just automating what they could do so that they can do things more quickly and move more quickly because that burden's taken off, but help them do things that they might not have been able to do before, or to do things that are not that rote and repeatable. And that's where AI comes in as a capability for augmenting the developer. So if we take the abstraction, automation, oddly enough, the third one happens to be an A, but artificial intelligence, and we put those three things together, that to me is what low code really needs to do moving forward. But a key part of what we do, though, is try to apply that to virtually everything we can on the behalf of the developer so that they can move more quickly and be much more expressive about what they do. So they can just declare, I want it to do this, and it will. What that leads you to as applications become more sophisticated, and multi-experience was one example of that, is that it takes low-code app development into new domains.
So going back just a minute to AI, because I know a lot of people are concerned, AI is going to take our jobs away, AI is going to replace people, but you talk about it as augmentation. Can we get into that a little bit? Because I know that's kind of a big topic that people think a lot about.
Yeah, yeah. I think it goes back to the nature of tools in the first place. Why do we make tools? We make tools so that we can do bigger and better things, that we can do things, we can move more quickly while we're doing things. We can accomplish them more quickly, and that's where AI really adds benefit. So I think of AI as being almost entirely about augmentation. Now, that augmentation can become very smart and start doing some things for us. But I think that it isn't just a matter of having a philosophy around it to avoid the takeover by the machines. I think that's what the machines do. And when we think about augmentation, we can think about applying it to the developer experience, to allow the developer to do more. And then in the applications that get built. AI clearly will play a very significant role moving forward in augmenting what the users of those applications can do. Because at the end of the day, the applications exist to help the user do something in the first place. And the more that we can bring intelligence to bear within those solutions become more competent and more helpful.
The way you describe that, Gordon, it's like there's a direct line from the creation of the wheel.
Yeah, to me, I
Right.
see it that way. Very
Like
much see it that way. Yeah, absolutely.
creating a
Chisels,
tool
yeah,
that helps people do more and makes their jobs easier. And there's just this progression from that cave person who figured that out all the way through to augmented reality. Um,
yeah.
so one of the other things really interesting you mentioned a couple minutes ago was about taking this low code approach or this abstraction and automation approach and applying it to new domains. So which domains should we go tackle first with this?
Well, the reason one tackles new domains isn't just to expand an offering when we think of the offering as an app platform. It's really, what does the individual need to do? We refer to them as makers. What does a maker need to do moving forward to make things? And there are some aspects of enterprise IT that have been their own domains, effectively, historically, that become part and parcel of making things, building digital solutions. The first one on the list, I think, is data. Data has been a part of applications forever, but in a very limited way. Typically, the data within an application belongs to that application. That's less and less true moving forward of the solutions that we create. So how can we make it easier for developers to discover and leverage data within the solutions that they create? Historically, that's been thought of as integration, data management. I believe very, very strongly that key aspects of that need to be brought directly into the development realm and into the developer experience. And that will only become more important as the types of data and the shapes that it comes in and the velocity that it comes in at and the other characteristics it has. Data is time-based, for example, or it is in many scenarios. How do we make all of that approachable in a low-code way? How do we apply the notions of abstraction and automation to working with data? So that's one domain. The next one that comes to mind is automation. When we think about it, virtually every application.
So we're not going to start small with either of these, Gordon. Like we're going to go after kind of
Yeah, these are super easy problems to solve. Yeah, well, automation really is at the core of what we've been doing with apps forever. I mean, that's the purpose of an app, is to do something that an individual did before or couldn't get done before. And increasingly, that means more and more. Digital solutions are inherently process and automation based in some way. when we think about insurance, what's one of the big things that's happening in retail insurance, you try to radically cut down the time that it takes to quote and bind a policy, right? What is that? That's process improvement. That's optimizing a process. That's automating a process, and perhaps even applying some intelligence to it so that individuals don't have to get involved in very much. That's what allows you to get a quote done instantly. There's a ton of integration behind that, and there's a ton of automation behind that. So therefore, to create digital solutions, process and process automation has to become part of the palette of capabilities that a maker has available to them.
Okay, and now I'm starting to see the connection with multi-experience that we were talking about, because I may want to get a quote on my desktop, but I might just want to get a quote, on my mobile device, or I might want to speak to a voice device to get a sense of what this thing might cost.
Absolutely. Or if I'm ordering a vehicle, or even deciding what vehicle to buy, right? That process begins, and then it takes some length of time for that to complete. So systems need to keep track of who the person is, what they're doing, and increasingly a variety of processes that come together to support their journey. Yeah, and I love the way you put that. They check in on those processes, and they interact with them on their terms whenever they want to, on whatever device they want to. So yeah, we need to support that.
Okay, so we talked about data, we talked about process automation. Is there anywhere else you think we could get a real, bang for our buck by applying a low-code approach to things?
Well, the other component that I think needs to come in, and it's beginning to come in, and we kind of alluded to it earlier in the discussion, is applying intelligence within digital solutions. That's AI is an interesting thing, because at one end there's a lot that we still can't do with it, right? And you have to have a very, very clear idea of what you need to create, and then you need data scientists to go off and build it and all that stuff. But on the other end, which is available today, we have cognitive services and intelligent processing services that solve very clear, very repeatable problems using natural language processing. That gets applied in digital solutions in a lot of different ways. Even intelligent OCR, is a component of that. So being able to bring cognitive services directly into the solutions that are being created, again, as a natural extension of the palette that the developer has available to them to work from, or the toolkit that they have. I think that's the third leg of the stool, really. That if we look at data and how to bring in data and work with data and manage data, we bring in the process and automation component, and then we bring in AI, to use a broad term for how to bring intelligence into the equation. I think that's the triangle that frames what we need to have moving forward.
Okay, so you mentioned the developer, and I think we should talk about him or her a little bit, because this feels like a lot of new technology for them to absorb, and a lot of additional types of output and expectation around what a developer skill set is.
Right.
Is that going to be just impossibly hard for them to absorb?
Well, clearly the intention of abstraction and automation is to remove from the developer's experience the details they don't need to worry about. But as you point out really, really nicely, there are new dimensions that the developer needs to consider. We can make it easier for them, but they need to consider those dimensions. And it's also the intersection of these things that creates digital solutions. So what we're beginning to see is a scenario where developers don't build things from scratch, from very kind of low-level technical capabilities anymore, where they begin to build more and more sophisticated solutions out of bigger building blocks and more sophisticated building blocks. And at Mendix, the way we think about that is a concept that we think of as an app service. And an app service isn't just a widget or a component. It may certainly contain those, but it contains a set of widgets, components, connections to cloud-hosted services that, when brought together, solve a specific problem. It could be a fairly fine-grained problem, like natural language processing, but what makes such a service more valuable is when it is contextualized with respect to, say, a domain or a use case. What makes it really valuable is when you put a number of these things together into what you could think of as a subassembly, or even a completely templatized solution, which would allow the developer to then basically snap together solutions that are very sophisticated, and then customize and tailor the aspects of it that they need to customize or tailor for their personal situation. So that, I think, is fundamentally required moving forward, to give people larger and larger things that they can leverage, that are more sophisticated, that bring various pieces together to solve a problem, but do it in a componentized way so that they can then do whatever they want with that. So, for example, if they want to add a new form of interaction channel, or alter the process, or nest it in a larger process, make it their own, they can do all those things. So app services, I think, are a real key to creating a low-code platform that enables people to build these much more sophisticated solutions that have these new dimensions that we're talking about.
Okay, so I think a more concrete example might help here. I think maybe we've gone too far on the abstraction side, if you will. So what would be an example of an app service that we might offer developers the ability to use?
Well, if we look at the more kind of fine-grained ones that you can start with, things like 3D visualization. That's a technology that's used a lot in engineering and manufacturing scenarios. So you can imagine that Siemens has a lot of great technology in that area, of course. But it's also really important in a lot of other scenarios. AR and VR, obviously, are fundamentally 3D based. So providing app services that allow people to use 3D visualization and build 3D user interfaces would be a great example of a sophisticated component that would be available as an app service. Same thing would be true of say, I brought up natural language processing, right? So those would be there. But if we just stopped at that level, that wouldn't be that different than if we were to put abstraction and automation on top of services that are available just in the world. What's interesting is when you put them together, as you point out, to solve a particular problem. So if we think about document processing, every organization has hundreds, if not thousands, of processes that are effectively document processing processes. And they invariably involve exactly the same things. You need to be able to analyze a document in some way, figure out what its structure is, apply some natural language processing to actually extract the content. Based upon that content, make an evaluation of what to do next. Where should it go in the process? Does it need to be reviewed by a human? Things like that. So there's an intelligent decision-making aspect of this, which, again, gets back into process. One could imagine app services that solve that problem in a generalized way, and then allow for customization as necessary at each of those stages or in each of those dimensions. So, for example, natural language processing has much lower error rates when it is very domain specific. I'm handling POs, in this industry, for example, allows POs to be processed more effectively. So that could happen. But I would also anticipate that moving forward, there would be highly specialized versions of something that's as common as document processing into something that's very appropriate for specific industries.
So that brings a kind of obvious question to bear, which is, this sounds like a very big engineering investment for Mendix to make to build
Right.
all of this stuff and have all of this domain expertise. So how are we thinking about that?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. And certainly no platform vendor is ever going to have all of the domain expertise that's necessary. On the technology front, there are specialist providers of horizontally applicable technology. And Sometimes those are used more in some industries than others. For example, geolocation and geotagging and those types of things tend to be used in certain industries, right? But it wouldn't make any sense for Mendix or any platform vendor to invest in creating all of those. And then, there are people and organizations that have a lot of domain expertise. They understand this particular form of manufacturing. They understand specialty insurance. They understand what they understand. And they might have some really intriguing ideas for how they could more broadly solve problems within those domains. So what we envision is an ecosystem where there's the platform and the capabilities and app services that we provide. There are contributors to that marketplace that provide specialized technology in areas. I gave you the example of geolocation and geotagging. There's also content management systems and things like that would be part of it. And then there are the individuals that do bring in that domain expertise that build higher level solutions that have value in how these capabilities are brought together to solve a specific problem in a domain. And so what we are creating is a marketplace to facilitate that, to create that ecosystem with a variety of participants that are necessary for creating these building blocks so that enterprises and organizations, regardless of what industry they're in, can find the capabilities that they need to build their digital solutions.
And do we see sort of an inception thing going on here where a solution provider might find a piece of a solution in the marketplace, put it into their solution, and then re-offer it in the marketplace? Or have I just
absolutely,
gone around the bend?
absolutely. I believe that will naturally happen. And we've witnessed similar things happening in other industries for sure, right? I mean, that's exactly how the auto industry works. So absolutely the same thing could happen in the low-code space. And the great thing is that everybody that participates gets value out of that. They get compensated for what they contribute, and they also obtain value by creating something that has more value on top of that. I like that infectious notion. Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in a short amount of time, and I'm excited about all of this technology. I'm sure our viewers are also. How soon can we have all of this? What's the time horizon on the sorts of things we've been talking about today?
Well, the core of what we're talking about today is already there, of course. The foundational elements have been part of our platform and our platform strategy for quite some time, and we've been delivering against that. So much of what we're talking about in some way, shape, or form is available now or very, very shortly. Some of the things that we're talking about, the technologies are involved are at different levels of maturity. As we talked about, at least at a high level a bit ago, you can build some very comprehensive solutions today leveraging existing AI capabilities. You may or may not call them AI. They're definitely AI, though, at their core. So cognitive services, for example. But it's going to be quite some length of time before anybody that wants to, somebody that doesn't have a data science background, can create their own machine intelligence, right? So you leverage what's available versus creating your own. One could imagine a future in which many more people can basically create their own machine learning systems and train them. How close are we to that? 3 years, 5 years, maybe longer? Will AI play a role in even creating those solutions? Will AI help the maker make them? Absolutely. There's no question about that. And I would anticipate that the low-code approach, that combination of abstraction and automation, is at the core of it as well. So some of this, plays out over many, many years. But I think the beginnings of it are absolutely there today.
That's exciting. Well, Gordon, as usual, great catching up with you on what is coming in the future and how we're thinking about it. Always a pleasure. Next year, we'll do it in Rotterdam.
I certainly hope so. Great chatting, Cheryl, as always.